My name is Rich Bruckner, and I'm an alcoholic. And glum lot here. Before I get started, I would just like to thank Jim. He took off of work yesterday all day, came to Des Moines, picked me up, drove round trip an hour, took me to lunch, hung out with me. We became fast friends. He did the same today, as far as I can tell. And that's the type of thing that I was taught in Alcoholics Anonymous, that if it's easy or convenient, you're doing it wrong. And I'm sure that I wasn't convenient. But everyone has just been so kind. I'd like to thank Doug for inviting me. And my room is just wonderful, and the fruit basket, and just everyone here has been so nice. I got to go to some meetings since I've been here. The McCormick group last night. I'm sure there's some McCormick group people here. And you all welcomed me, and I met some new folks. My new friend Scott wasn't going to come, but he did. And we roped him in. And I'll tell you, I've just had a blast today. I got to go to the noon group, and I love going new places and meeting new people in Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous, if you get nothing else from my talk, it is the greatest thing that has ever happened in my life. And taking the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous is the greatest thing that I never wanted to do. With that said, I'm from Ocean City, Maryland. My home group's the Fresh Air group of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're a big book meeting. You're going to hear something read from the first 164 pages of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're even going to talk about it after we read it. And that's pretty unique to some of you. With that said, I'd like to invite God in before we get started here. I work with a prayer called the Set Aside Prayer a lot, where God, please set aside everything we know or think we know about this program, this book, these 12 steps, Alcoholics Anonymous, and most of all you, God, that we may have an open mind tonight and this weekend, hear something new, experience something new, and have a new experience with this thing that we call Alcoholics Anonymous. All right, with that said, this is one of the things that I get to do in Alcoholics Anonymous. This is one of my favorites because it's simply coming here and kind of giving you guys a report on what God, or if you don't like that word, I like the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous. That works just as well. It's just like a big show and tell is what Jim was talking about. I go through the 12 steps. My job's to drink enough, that I hurt bad enough, that I listen to somebody, I do what you say, and then I get to report back, and I get to go to new places. I've never even been to Iowa. I didn't know anyone. And now I have several friends in this room, and I just kind of report what's happened in my life. And I get to share the good news of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's what it's been in my life, is good news. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. I came from a wonderful family. My mother and father have never had a drink of alcohol. I have one little sister. She doesn't drink. I've heard theories since I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, which I was separated from alcohol August 30th of 2004. I thank you, but I say that I was separated from alcohol because that's what happened. I had nothing to do with it. I appreciate the applause. I didn't quit drinking. I didn't put it down. I didn't make a decision. I didn't put the plug in the jug. That's exactly what people like myself are incapable of doing. Why I was drunk on August the 29th and sober on August the 30th, I have no idea, other than the word that you folks have taught me about this wonderful power or the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous that we call God to keep things short. And what happened on that day, I'm not sure. And you guys taught me, I've heard all types of things, that alcoholism may be genetic. If that's true, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't have any theory on that. I know that no one in my family drank, so that may or may not be true. My sponsor told me that I'm an alcoholic because I drank too much, and that's worked for me. You know, I've also heard this theory of an imaginary line that we cross into alcoholism. That might also be true. I'm pretty sure I was drunk when it happened, so I missed it. And my book tells me that that's one of the the baffling features of alcoholism, that it's awfully it's often too late, before I realize it's a problem. And especially when my problem seems to be my solution. Alcohol, alcoholic, you would think alcohol would be the problem. It just didn't seem that way to me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my first drinking, just because I remember it, and that's a sign. If anyone in this room can remember your first drink like we tend to, other people look at me like I'm nuts. They remember their first kiss, maybe their first wedding. I remember my first experience with alcohol. My parents, I went to public school up through third grade. My parents were working class people that just loved me and wanted the best for me. Of course, I didn't see it that way. I know I see things a lot different now on the other side of these steps and this experience that happens as the result of this course of action. At the time, I would have told you that they tore me out of third grade, and away from my friends, and put me in this private school that was 45 minutes away, and I had to ride a really long bus ride, and I didn't fit in with any of the kids there. That was when I first found out that, I came from the country, and this was like a private school in the city, and I found out that I was a redneck. I found out that they would tease me about smelling like hay because I would feed the horses before I came to school. They found out that I was poor, compared to them. And I found all these things out because they were nice enough to tell me, what I was experiencing now. I don't know that there's any such thing as an enlightened alcoholic. But if there is, a guy named Chuck Chamberlain really struck home to me when he said there's really only one problem that encompasses all of our other problems, and that's this feeling of conscious separation. And that's when that began for me, was this feeling of conscious separation. And he said there's only one solution that encompasses all solutions, and that's conscious contact or unity. And that's what these 12 steps have given me, is where I could stand here amongst you and look anybody in the eye and tell you that for the first time in my life, I feel like there's nothing missing and nothing broken inside of me. And that's a big deal for a guy like me. I'm going to that school, trying to make new friends. It's not going well. I decided in my mind, I've always been good at sports, that they liked me and tolerated me because I was a goalkeeper, and you got to be nice to the goalkeeper or you'll lose the game. I don't know that any of that's true. It's just what I made it up, and I stuck with it for about 8 years. I always wanted to hang out with the older kids. There was sort of a rule on the school bus. I don't know if anyone has this going on in Iowa. The older kids sit at the back of the bus, the younger kids in the front. If you go past an imaginary line, you get it. I've also never gone back and checked this out with the school, but there was a kid that was assigned to me, I think, by the school. His name was Reed, and Reed's job was just to beat me up every day. I was somewhere around 6th or 7th grade. Some of the 8th graders said, do you want to skip class and do some drinking? And I always wanted to be with the older guys. I always wanted to fit in, be a part of anything. And that was the first day I started lying. I said yes. I'd never skipped class. I spoke about it as if I'd skip class all the time. You want to do some drinking? Absolutely. I'd never done any drinking. They say, what did you drink? And out of my mouth came bourbon. I don't know where I got that to this day. And I will tell you that I wish that I'd have known that I was going to end up in Alcoholics Anonymous, because what we ended up drinking was peach schnapps, and that's pretty sissy. And I got to stand here like in Iowa with like tough cowboys and stuff and tell you that I drank peach schnapps. I mean, it doesn't get lamer. But when I found out that it wasn't what that stuff did to me that makes me alcoholic, it was what that stuff did for me that makes me alcoholic and one of you. See, alcohol, it's tricky because it does to us the same thing it does to anybody else. If you put enough alcohol in a non-alcoholic and put them behind the wheel of the car, they might get a DUI. If you put enough in them, they're going to throw up. If you put enough in them, they're going to be hungover. If you put enough in them, they're going to miss work and maybe get fired. If you put enough in them for a long enough period of time and stop, they'll even go through the DTs. None of that means they're alcoholic. But it was what that beverage did for me that day, not to me. And what happened was, as it went down and I was talking with those guys, the first thing I noticed was that, instead of me feeling kind of lucky to be hanging out with them, that, they should be kind of lucky to be hanging out with me. And that was a nice change of pace. The next thing I noticed was that I had to go to the bathroom, and I went in the bathroom at that school. It said boys on it. And I thought that was kind of weird because I felt like a man. But I went into the boys' room feeling like a man for the first time. And while I was in there was this girl at that school. Her name was Nikki, and I really liked Nikki. I didn't know how to tell Nikki I liked Nikki. I didn't know how to talk to Nikki. I mean, no clue. But I decided on that day that I was going to walk to the back of the bus where I knew I was going to get beat up. I was going to sit next to Nikki, and this was going to be the day. And I got on that bus, and I walked to the back of the bus, and as I was walking to the back of the bus, Reed started to get up out of his seat, and as he started to get up out of his seat, I just laid into him with everything my little body had, and Reed went out cold on that seat, and he was out, and the whole bus got really, really quiet, and I went and I sat down next to Nikki, and Nikki was looking at me, and I was looking at Nikki, and there was just this feeling with this quiet of like long overdue respect. And it felt really good to finally let Reed know how I felt about Reed. I didn't know it was called a resentment. I didn't have inventory then. But that sure felt good. And we came to Nikki's bus stop, and when Nikki went to get off the bus, she leaned over. And she gave me this little kiss that was half on my lips and half on my cheek. And this puppy was different than anything my mother or my aunt ever gave me. I mean, I felt it in my toes. Some of you guys remember this. I mean, this was the first one. And I got off that school bus feeling like $1 million that day. And I went inside, and like I told you, my mother and father never drank. They knew that I'd been drinking. I got sick that night. Peach schnapps it's like syrup. It's a mess. Much better going the other way. I was sick as a dog. I was grounded forever because I come from a good family. I don't know if anybody remembers being grounded forever. I mean, it was bad. And I woke up that next morning feeling like that and knowing the type of trouble I was in, and the thought went through my mind, are you ever going to do any more of that drinking? It wasn't a split. You bet. You bet. Sick, grounded forever. What a small price to pay for what I had going on that school bus. Sign me up. And that's what I did. I signed up. At that moment, what I didn't know was I was just turning my will and my life over to the power of alcohol. And that this thing, alcohol, that was doing so much for me, that gave me so much, and it continued to do that for me through high school. I fit in. I was able to date. I was able to interact with women. I was able to still play sports. I mean, it was just giving me life, it felt like. And I had no idea that this thing that was doing so much for me was going to one day turn in flight like a boomerang and one day come back and nearly shred me to ribbons. I love when Bill wrote that. I was like, that's it. That's it. And what I didn't know was just like we get sober one day at a time, that one drink at a time I was going to give away every bit of morality, every bit of values, every bit of decency my mother and father gave me. One drink at a time, so slowly that I didn't know I was doing it. I ended up getting to go to college on a soccer scholarship to a really good school in San Diego. It was a Jesuit school. I didn't know what the Jesuits were back then. Turns out they're a particular brand of Catholicism that are really into things like education, building men of integrity, honesty, value. I mean, a whole bunch of good stuff that I didn't stand for. I got there, and our book talks about that. Often the alcoholic lives a double life. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my college experience, and that have 2-a-day soccer practices. We're a Division I NCAA school, practice in the morning, team breakfast. Then I go to these classes, practice in the evenings. Then I have to drink to fall asleep to be able to do it the next day. I get a lady, she's called an academic advisor. I mean, how very neutral term, right? Academic advisor. You would think she's called like, a dictarian or something. I mean, it was like, I don't know about you guys, one of the things about me is anyone in my entire life, when I look back, especially through inventory, that's ever tried to help me, I thought was trying to hurt me. Anyone, and I've had lots of good people try to help me, and I always think they're trying to hurt me and hold me down. Why are you trying to tell me what to do? And all this lady was trying to do was help me pick classes that I might, maybe, possibly graduate in 4 years. That was it. And one of the things that she said to me was, if you want to go on and do any of the things that you like to talk about wanting to do, you're going to need to get some other things on your resume other than being a mediocre student and a good soccer player. In case you haven't heard, there's not much of a professional soccer career. And you need some things that make it look like you're out, that are altruistic. I didn't know what that word meant. AA is very big on it. When she explained it to me, what I heard, it's probably not what she said, was that you need to get some things on your resume that make you look good. I get that. I'm all about, what would you like me to do to look good? What she had suggested was that the University of San Diego, for about 3 years, had some plans going where they wanted to start a student-run Office of Alcohol and Drug Education. They wanted to get a student certified as a certified alcohol and drug counselor and start this peer counseling program for alcohol and drugs where the kids could talk to somebody other than an adult or a professional counselor. And she said, we'd like to get you certified. You're going to be the founder of this office. I mean, this is going to look really good on a resume. You're going to spearhead the Office of Alcohol and Drug Education. Off I went and get certified, and there we go. Meanwhile, at this school, I was really out of place there. It looked like Beverly Hills 90210. There's palm trees. It's just a beautiful place. I was able to determine once again that everybody there had much more than I did financially, and that I didn't fit in, and that to fit in, that was I was going to, I look at you girls, and I mean, nobody's going to want to go out with me unless I have some money, nice shoes and a car like everybody else. This was what's going through my mind. That's the game in Southern California, so I'm going to play it. There's a couple other guys that were I perceived to be like myself. They were on the soccer team. They were there on scholarship as well. 4 guys. They were from Tijuana, Mexico, which was about 20 minutes away. These guys had lots of cousins and brothers, lots of cousins, right across the border. They knew how to get this green stuff that the rich kids at college like to smoke. And before you know it, I'm engaged in business coming across the border. So now my day looks like this. I'm getting up. I have the morning practice. I'm going to these Jesuit classes in the daytime. Got to go to the evening practice. I have to drink a little to get ready because now from 7 to 10 I got to counsel you folks with your alcohol and drug problems. Then I got to go home and shrink wrap this green stuff that I'm mailing across the country. It's a long day. It's a long day. And then I have to drink a lot to fall asleep. And when I got to AA, by the way, if any of you need anything after counseling, come see me. And I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous that a clear conscience makes for a soft pillow. If you'd have told me back then, I'm not sure I'd have understood it. I just knew that I needed something to fall asleep, and alcohol helped. And I was drinking more and more. Soon the green stuff turned into the white stuff. It's more money. It was easier to transport. By my senior year, beginning of my senior year, I owned my very first house at 423 Nautilus Street in La Jolla, which is one of the most beautiful counties and the most expensive counties in the United States. I was driving a silver BMW convertible that they only make in Europe. It has a very special number on the back to let you all know that they don't even make this car here. That's how nice it is. And I'm dating the most beautiful girl in the school. At least that's what you all told me, so I date her. It was about 7 a.m. one morning. I'm eating cereal in my underwear with a pretty girl sitting next to me in this house. And boom, 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 all these flash bombs go off. The doors come down. They're coming in every place. The next thing I know, I have the plastic zip ties around my ankles and my hands. I don't know if anyone's had the plastic zip ties. They make handcuffs look comfortable. And up to this point, I've been arrested several times with alcohol, in high school and college. But it's always what I just call drunken, stupid crimes. I was no criminal. I don't want to paint myself that way. I wasn't a tough guy. I was somebody that when I drank, I did dumb stuff, and I always got caught. I also thought drinking and driving was a recreational sport. So I'd spent weekends in jail. My parents would leave me there to teach me a lesson. Small price to pay for what I had going on Friday night, right? Then 3 days, then a week. Small price to pay. This time, though, was a little bit different. I was going to the federal penitentiary, the Metropolitan Correction Center in downtown San Diego, on this federal sentencing guideline chart with the 27 kilos of cocaine. And the San Diego Union Tribune, Los Angeles Times, said Jesuit student, 27 kilos of cocaine. It was 45 years to something big. It was scary. And I was in there, and when I was in there, a couple things happened worth reporting to you guys. It was the beginning, I believe, of what we call in AA a spiritual awakening. And that's a strange term because I thought it was something mystical, and really what it was my spirit was starting to awaken, meaning that I saw things a little bit different for the first time. The first thing that I realized, I was surrounded, there were several thousand men in there. I was the only one in the entire penitentiary that was guilty. I know that because that's all they talk about all day. If anybody's been in there, you know. I'm here because of my stupid mechanic. If he'd have fixed the brake lights on my car, the police would have never pulled me over. If they'd have never pulled me over, they wouldn't have smelled the marijuana. They wouldn't have searched the trunk. That stupid mechanic. I'm here because of my wife. If she'd have listened, I wouldn't have had to hit her. These guys believe it. And that's how I'd always lived my whole life without knowing it, was just these little lies that I tell myself. And they're much worse than the lies that I tell you because I believe these. And I tell them so frequently that that's just becomes a part of my life. And for the first time, I think what happened, I was just surrounded with enough of me that it gave me a glimpse of, man, they're really full of it. Wait a second. So are you. And as far as an awakening goes, for the first time in my life, this was it. I realized that I was where I was because of who I was, and I was who I was because of how I lived. I was where I was because of who I was, and I was who I was because of how I lived. That's a big deal for a guy like me, to put that together. And I'm not sure I put that together. I hesitate using those words. It hit me. I was able to comprehend that. And I believe that's an awakening because people like me don't think like that. I also went to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. In there, 2 guys dressed up like losers like me tonight. Squares, probably paid taxes and worked from 9 to 5. Just couldn't figure out how to make a real living. Came in, and I had no idea what we had to do in Alcoholics Anonymous to get these background clearances and to give up our time and to come in there and to bring me the message. I just wanted out of the cell for a little while. That was the only reason I was there. I sat in the, in the way back with my collar up, doing my best, trying to be a tough guy, jailhouse look. And one of the things that struck me one day, they were taking me back to my cell, and I'm shuffling back, and my thought about these 2 guys was, man, these 2 guys really got it bad. They can never drink again. One day I'm going to get out of here, but those 2 guys can never drink again. And I actually had a feeling of where I felt sorry for them. They were going home to their homes. I'm looking at 45 years, and I'm feeling sorry for these 2 suckers, from Alcoholics Anonymous. And our book talks about, the inability to differentiate the true from the false. Often we become so warped, by alcohol that I can't even differentiate what's going on. And that's what was happening. I was in there for 9 months. About 2 days prior to trial, turns out that one of the DEA agents had some problems of honesty with his own on the affidavit to get the search warrant from my house. Everything that they found got thrown out, and I walked out of the penitentiary. I would like to tell you that I recognized the miracle and hot-tailed it right to AA, because those guys just carried the message loud and proud into the penitentiary. But anyone that's spent so much as a week knows that when you get out of jail, you're thirsty. And I couldn't stay in San Diego. There was a lot of people looking for me from Tijuana, San Diego, for a lot of reasons. And that started a period of my life. I couldn't go back east. My parents were done with me. I'd bled them for every last nickel I could. This was the first time on the federal deal that I couldn't get any bond. I was considered a flight risk. It did make a difference. I also remember it breaking through that shell. I like to call them direct hits. For an alcoholic of my type, I don't respond very well to near misses. That's like when you roll a car a couple times with your friends and you all get out. I get out of that car and I go, man, I'm a good drunk driver. You all right?
Yeah.
We're good. Let's roll this thing back over. And off we go. That's a near miss. 9 months in the penitentiary, evidence gets dismissed, you walk out, near miss. Man, I'm good. My lawyer's good. None of these things register to an alcoholic of my variety. One of the things that did, when at that bond review hearing, the United States Attorney stood up and he said, if Mr. Bruckner's given any bond whatsoever, he will flee to Mexico where all of his business partners are. He will live a happy and successful life in Mexico. We'll never see him again, Your Honor. And for some reason, that was a direct hit. A happy and successful life. It's kind of hard to escape the truth. Truth sort of resonates within somebody like me when I hear it. Even though I want to deny it, it resonates. And I knew that I hadn't had a happy and successful life anywhere. From the wonderful horse farm I grew up on to a nice house in La Jolla and anywhere in between, happy and successful life was not how I was feeling inside. That was important to me. I got out of there. That started a new period of my life where I believed that I had surrendered to alcohol. Alcohol had become lock, stock, and barrel. It owned me. I drank when I didn't want to drink. I was drinking to forget, but I couldn't forget anymore. I couldn't go back east. I couldn't face my parents. My parents were done with me, and my pride kept me from going home. I have one little sister in the whole world. I love her to death. She's 3 years younger than me. She hadn't talked to me for about 6 years. I moved to Colorado. I'd stay in Colorado until trouble happened in the middle of the night. I was a big midnight mover. You pack all your stuff down. You leave half of it. Each time you move, you have half of what you did the time. Went from Colorado over to Sun Valley, Idaho to Utah. Always leaving at night. I'd stay as long as I could until I wore out my welcome. Some of the things that happened in my life when, went from weekends in jail, when I started working with those Mexican guys. If I took off my shirt, I've been stabbed in Panama. You'd see on the back of my shoulder I was branded by the Mexican guys that I was working for so that I knew who I worked for. The price I was paying was getting steeper, but I still thought it was okay. Our book... The more I'm drinking as I'm going around, and I'm still lying to myself and to some of you, if I'd have run across one of the beautiful women that are sitting in this room, in a bar in Colorado or somewhere, you'd have said, what are you doing? Who are you? Tell me about yourself. I'd say, well, my name's Rich. I'm traveling across. And that was kind of how I saw myself. And my delusional mind was like a romantic sojourner, across the great Americas or something. And really, I'm running. I'm like a guy without a country. I can't be west. There's people looking for me. I can't go home. I'm a man without a country, and I'm scared to death inside. And I'm a kid with a man's body. And every now and then I'd convince one of you of that that I was traveling. And eventually I ended up where a lot of big shot wannabe tough guy drug dealers end up. And that was back in Ocean City, Maryland, on my mom's couch. And if you're laughing, that means you may have started sobriety on mom's couch. And I've met lots of people that start sobriety on mom's couch. It's a great place to start this journey. And I got back there, and my mother said, you're welcome to stay here as long as you want, as long as you got it. You don't drink. And I said, you know what? I can't even believe she took me home one more time. I am never, ever, ever going to drink again. This is my one big chance to turn it around. I meant it with everything in my body. It wasn't 3 weeks that she puts me out of there. I did remember AA. I was coming back to you all. I'm coming in and out of your meetings, drinking afterwards. I'd get jobs. I'd do what I was told to do. I think some very well-meaning people said some things to me that I didn't hear right, I guess. They said things like, hey, kid, put the plug in the jug. Just quit drinking, would you? That's what we do around here. We don't drink one day at a time. Just put the plug in the jug, would you? And I'm here to tell you that if I could put the plug in the jug, I don't need any one of you. And I need you guys desperately, more today than ever. This isn't for people that can put the plug in the jug. I couldn't do it. And they said, just go to a lot of meetings. That's what we do. It's a lot of meetings. Meeting makers make it. I was going to 3 meetings a day. I'm making your coffee. I'm setting up the literature racks. I'm setting up the chairs. And then I go home and get drunk. I can only stay sober for so long. Just for so long. It just gets too great. I'm like a tea kettle. When I'm not drinking, that's one of the other things that was confusing. You guys talked about when you weren't drinking, your lives were getting good and happy and full. When somebody like me stops drinking, things get worse, not better. If you're new and things are getting worse, not better, you are in the right spot. You might be an alcoholic like I'm an alcoholic. When I'm not drinking, I start to notice things that my mother can't look at me straight in the eye without her head dropping to the ground. That bothers me sober, not when I'm drunk. It starts to bother me that my little sister hasn't talked to me in 6 years. It starts to bother me that the IRS is looking for me, that I have to look at my caller ID before I can answer it. Our book calls that bondage of self. I didn't know that. It's funny, a lot of us when we get here, we don't have a house, a car, anything. I came to you folks, I didn't have a driver's license, a registration, insurance. You guys talked about that, having all of those things like on the same day, on the same car. I called that the trifecta. I was like, how do they do that? A driver's license with your name, a registration, and insurance, all going on in the same state. I mean, miraculous indeed, right? So they're telling me this stuff that I perceive, AA's not working. I will tell you this, that if I came into a meeting where there were these things sitting up like this, you should really put these down. Because what happens when a guy like me sees this is if I have time, I go to another meeting. Because I don't really know what y'all are talking about with these steps. I don't like talking about stuff like that. I like talking about the problems in my life. I like telling you about my girlfriend that just left me, and I like telling you about my dog that ran away when I was 12. And I like telling you how about my mom won't let me in my own house. I like sharing the problem. And there's a spiritual principle that water seeks its own level. And I was drawn to those types of meetings, where it was just discussion with no particular format. And it was, someone would start with the problem du jour. And that would be the topic, and I loved, I got fired again. That was like my favorite thing, to sit around for an hour and talk about that. But there were some people that would come into the meetings and they always had the book with them and they were happy and smiling. And they bothered me more than anyone because I'm not happy when I'm not drinking. I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. And that's an understatement, one of many in our book. I'm going to tell you about this. There was this one girl that was more disturbing to me than anyone else. She was disgusting. And you guys are going to agree with me on this. Her name was Janine. And Janine was one of these chicks that always had her little big book on her arm. And she had sponsees that she didn't call sponsees. She didn't call them pigeons. She called them duckies. Isn't that bad? And she'd come into the meeting, and there'd be about 6 of them in back of her. All following her. And she'd always be talking about the book and the steps and all these, they'd have 30 days sober, and I just shared my 4th step, and I feel so great, and and they're getting better. And I've been in and around and amongst you, and I'm getting no better. If I came into a meeting and I saw Janine or the Duckies, I was gone. I'm out of there. I'll find another meeting or go to none or go to the bar. And if sober and happy is repulsive to you, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. I relate to you. So towards the end of my drinking, my mother has a restraining order. I'm not allowed in her house. Where she sleeps in her house, with her doors locked, inside of her bedroom, with her purse underneath of her bed. And that probably tells you a little bit about our previous relationship. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning. Bill in his story talks about when the morning terror was on, I would steal from my wife's slender purse or something of that nature. And I knew what he was talking about. You know, when he talked about that, that's when I need more, and that's when I'll do things that are just repulsive to me the next day. And I broke into my mom's house, and I'm doing my best commando crawl. I'm on my stomach, going across the bedroom floor so she won't hear me. I reach with my arm underneath the bed for the purse, and my mother's eyes drop off the side of the bed, and she catches me square in the eyes, and she said, "Rich, take it. Would you just take it?" And that was another direct hit, folks. That was a direct hit. And I took it, and I stayed drunk for another 2 or 3 days. And the place where I was staying, 5-star dive, I had come back to AA. That was the end for me. I didn't know it, but then I started this journey of probably the most painful period of my time, which is not drinking and not changing in Alcoholics Anonymous. We have all kinds of neat, cute definitions of insanity, don't we? Doing the same thing, expecting different results, and all of this stuff. My favorite, it's pretty insane to belong and attend and come to a 12-step program and never take the 12 steps. That's me. And that's what I'm doing. And I'd had some liver problems. The doctor told me that what I couldn't do was to take any Tylenol for a year. That Tylenol is terrible for your liver, but if I laid off the Tylenol, my liver would bounce back, and no drinking, of course. Okay. I was 36 days without a drink. I wouldn't dare say sober. I was 36 days again amongst you. I'm making your coffee. I'm watching all the happy people, and I'm miserable. And I reached the point that our book talks about, the jumping off place, where I couldn't go on one more day without drinking, and I couldn't do your program. I determined that by looking at the steps. I make up things in my mind. I look at them and decide things. Never had a sponsor. Thought I had to do it myself. Guys like me, I'd really get stuck at the 4th step. I don't write inventory. That's called a paper trail. If you live like I lived, I'm not interested in going back to the penitentiary, So 36 days sober, I took every Tylenol and pill I could get a hold on in that cabinet. What happened was I was in the kitchen, apparently, where I fell. And I don't know a better word than God or the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm not very good at talking about it. I think that's what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous, is I tell my story and you guys see the magic work in it. But what happened that day was my body collapsed. And when I fell out, I fell into the refrigerator. And the refrigerator hit that crappy wall. And a lady that lived next door was home from work sick that day. So she heard the refrigerator hit the crappy wall, thought something was wrong, came in, looked in the door, saw feet, called 911, and I woke up back in the same hospital that I'd been in 4 times the month prior. I'm not sure how all of that happens, but you guys have done a nice job of explaining it to me. And when I woke up in that hospital, I woke up in one of those sexy paper hospital gowns, where your butt kind of hangs out, and I'm hooked up to every contraption under the sun, and there's beeping and all of that, and I look, and who's at the foot of the bed? Janine. And Janine has brought the duckies. They're all lined up. And Janine did not speak to me that day, but she did talk to the duckies. And this is what she told them. She said, "Girls, I want you to take a good look. This is what happens to an alcoholic that refuses to take our steps. Let's go, girls." I think that was the thing that it broke through any last bit of ego that might have been left. I realized I was the poster I was the poster child for Poor Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm the guy that you bring your sponsees to see what not to do. And here I am in Iowa. No, so the Duckies leave, and here's my big, this is the greatest moment of my life. This is my spiritual awakening, and it's quick. Pay attention. The thought went through my mind, if I get out of here, I'm going to find one of those people that has that book, that looks happy, and I'm going to do everything they tell me to do. That was it. I'm going to find one of those people that has that book, and I'm going to do everything that they tell me to do. And I don't listen to anybody. Ever. My whole life. So I don't know where that came from. But I knew that I'd exhausted every possible remedy that I could come up with. And it turns out that Alcoholics Anonymous, our 12 steps, are a wonderful plan of action for people that have run out of plans of action. If you still got one, there's nothing anybody's going to say that's going to keep you from exercising it. But if you're sitting here tonight because you're out of plans, we've got a really good one. And I sat down and met this guy, Jim, and Jim had a sponsor. His sponsor was a guy named Clarence Snyder, and Clarence Snyder had a sponsor, a guy named Dr. Bob Smith, and they were real big on this book, and especially the black part in it, and really nothing more. And he started to explain to me what was going on with me. We started in the thing called the doctor's opinion, and boy, it started to make sense to me that I had this body that can't handle alcohol, coupled with a mind that can't leave it alone. And that's quite a position to be in for a person like me. When you have a body that has this physical allergy to alcohol, it manifests itself in this thing called craving. What is craving, Jim? And you say, well, dummy, that's when you have one, and you have one, and the first drink wants a second drink, and the second drink begs for a third drink. The third drink demands a fourth drink. The fourth drink insists on a fifth drink, and you want the 10th drink more than you ever wanted the first drink. Whoa, Jim, that's exactly what happens to me. It's exactly what happens to me. And he said, well, that's not a big deal, and it turns out that I'm allergic to strawberries in real life. And when I eat a strawberry, my throat will close. I get blotches. I learned that when I was like 5 years old. I've never had another strawberry. I don't go to Strawberries Anonymous. I don't have a strawberry sponsor. I don't watch you all. I'm counting your strawberry intake. I don't think, maybe I could eat strawberries in a milkshake. I don't come up with clever ideas. So it was very clear to me that my relationship with alcohol was much different than my relationship with strawberries, because it was just the fact that I have this allergy to it. The solution would be then don't drink. It's that easy. And if that's the solution, don't drink, and you can don't drink, then do it. And that was this unmanageable part, the second part of this thing where he was explaining to me about this obsession of my mind, that I have a mind that's going to always bring me back to that which is killing me. Someday, somehow, it'll convince me that it's going to be okay. And that's what I'm up against. I had no idea. The real problem for the alcoholic centers in the mind, not the body, he told me. And that made sense to me. It was like for the first time, a guy put this in a way that I could understand it. And that first step, I was done it without knowing I was done it. And, he liked calling me little names and smarty, and then dummy, and then smarty. And he said, the word powerless, what does it mean? We'll look at it the other way around. Less power, right? He says, well, what do you have less power than is required to do? And that's that second part of the step, that unmanageable. He says, what decision have you made time and time and time again, and you don't seem to be able to manage your decision? I said, well, that's the decision to never drink again. He said, so you have less power than is required to manage your own decision to never drink again. Wow. All right. I'm down with that. And, came to believe, what this power, blah, blah, blah. He said, you've already done that. And I said, what do you mean? That's like God stuff. And he said, no, you've already done that. And how do you figure? He said, well, you keep coming back to us here in Alcoholics Anonymous. You've been to a lot of doctors. You've been to a lot of drying out places. We call them wind-up joints. It's where you wind up when guys like me drink. Hospitals and the rehabs, and you name it. Sometimes a psychiatrist or some priest that's going to try to save me up that particular day. It's just where I wind up when I'm desperately seeking help. And He says, you're not going back to them anymore. You keep coming to us. Why do you keep coming here? He said, obviously you've come to believe that there's a solution here. Just think of the feeling in this room tonight. When we get 2 or 3 or 4 of us or 400 of us together, there's a certain feeling in here for me. I had no question that there was a power in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, well, you're here and you keep coming back. And anybody that doesn't have to be here and is here, and in my experience, you don't get like court-ordered to conventions. Chances are you've come to believe in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's a great place to start. Our book says that's a fine start. I made a decision. Step 3, he said, that's all it is. He said, you're going to make a decision to go ahead with the rest of the steps. And he told me that the only physical evidence, I love to say, my line was, I'm working on the 3rd step. Right, Scott? We were talking about that last night. And there's code language that the old-timers know in Alcoholics Anonymous that I didn't know. And working on the 3rd step means that's code from scared to do the 4th step. Because there isn't any way to work on a 3rd step. It's a decision. I've either made it or I haven't. And I hadn't made it, and I was scared, and I didn't know how to tell you I was scared. He said, when you write out that 4th step, that is written proof of having done the 3rd step. It's the only physical evidence of a 3rd step there is a written 4th step, and I shared that, and my life started to change. I started to see, what made me up, some of my greater deficiencies, and I'd never been more willing, to have that stuff go away. And another guy, by that point, another sponsor came into my life, a gentleman named Roger McMahon. He's still my sponsor today, and he'd be mad at me if I didn't use his name because we're not anonymous from each other. And if anybody's in the Bethany Beach, Delaware area, he'd be thrilled to have you call him. He loves helping people and hanging out with Alcoholics Anonymous. He came into my life at about that 9th step, and he said, Rich, Alcoholics Anonymous is largely theoretical up to step 9. He said, all you are, up to step 9, you're a very well-informed jerk. That's it. That's it. You know a lot about yourself. Imagine that. Something having to do with you. But you've absolutely done nothing to wipe the slate clean. You've done nothing to set the record straight. You're a very well-informed jerk. And how free do you want to be? That was his line with me on the 9th step. How free do you want to be? So we have all kinds of sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. We have everything from ground beef to filet mignon. How free do you want to be? And I want the filet mignon. I'm a pig, I want to stay sober like I wanted to drink. And we embarked on this journey of the 9th step, and it was this is where the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous happened for me a lot in my life. The first thing he had me do was to start to date my mother. Once a week, he said, call and take your mother on a date. To lunch, to dinner, whatever she'll do with you, you take her on a date. And you dress nice, put a collared shirt on, tuck it in. He would do things we were talking, he used to, at meetings, he would knock a hat off my head if I wore a ball cap, to a meeting. He would say things like, this is a sacred place called Alcoholics Anonymous. You might not appreciate it yet, but one day it'll save your life. And he felt that way about AA, and now I feel that way. I wanted to kill him then. So I'm starting to date my mother, and I'm going to my home group, and I have a little job there, and my life is starting to change. And my first job in Alcoholics Anonymous was they don't hire guys like me. I've been arrested 36 times if you pulled my rap sheet. And I will say that on my 4th step, I wrote it. He also had me get a credit check. He took me to the state police and had me fingerprinted and pulled a background check. And he said, this is how you see yourself. This is how the rest of the world sees you. This is the reality of the situation. I mean, I couldn't get a job at, anywhere really that did a background check. And so I was sweeping the floor in a picture frame shop. There was a guy in AA that hand-carved picture frames out of wood, and I would sweep the floor, and we'd listen to speaker tapes, and I really appreciate the Dick and the folks that taped these conferences and the people that have been doing these conferences long before I got to AA, because I got sober on these tapes, and CDs now. And in that picture frame shop, we'd sweep the floor and listen to speaker tapes all day long. All day long. And then he'd take me to a meeting that night and come back to work the next morning and speaker tapes. Dating mom And at that, I was making $6.10 an hour. I think my paycheck was about $230 some a week. And I always had money left over at the end of the week. It was the craziest thing. I mean, more than when I was, living the other way. It's the weirdest thing about Alcoholics Anonymous. A little bit is a lot here. When we shift our focus to the spiritual, the material takes care of itself. And there's always more left than I thought when I'm being a good steward of this stuff that's brought into my life and living the way that you guys are and following you around. I'm starting to have fun. My mom, I noticed, she would start to look me in the eye while we were having dinner after a period of time. And if you'd have told me that, you drink because it's one of the reasons you drink, it's very important for your mother to look you in the eye and for you to feel like you have a relationship where you're a son and you're useful in her life and play the role of a son, I'd have said, what are you talking about? I now know that that's one of the greatest things in my life is to have the relationship that I have with my mother. It's unbelievable. Said your little sister hadn't talked to you for 6 years. For some reason, I think it was the result of that one last drug deal. I had a pair of season tickets to the Baltimore Ravens. I didn't have a house. My clothes were in a trash bag, but I had season tickets to the Ravens. We're weird like that. But my sister lives about 3 hours away. He said, send the tickets to your sister. I said, why would I do that? And she hadn't talked to me. And so he said, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, send them to your sister. How free do you want to be? And I sent the tickets off to my sister, and she didn't call. Nothing happened. And he said, send the next set of tickets. And I said, you've lost your mind. I did it once. That was bad enough. Would I look stupid? And he said, send them. And I sent them. And I think it was the third quarter, if I remember correctly. I couldn't tell you who it was or what it was. I just know that my phone rang. And on the other end of that phone was a very excited little girl going, did you just see that pass? Did you see that pass? We tied it up. He's in the end zone. Did you see that? Are you watching the game? And I wasn't watching the game, but I was talking to my little sister for the first time in 6 years. And I kept sending the tickets, and we kept talking around football. At first, the conversation was just her calling me to tell me about the game and who won. And then she bought her first house about 3 hours away from me down in Baltimore City, right near the stadium. And it was a little tent, row house that needed a lot of fixing up. And I'd work all week and sweeping the floor. And then I got, actually probably around 2 years sober, I got what I thought was the greatest job in AA. I was vacuuming swimming pools out. And you have to do that real early in the morning because it turns out that people go swimming at like 10 a.m. I didn't know anybody got up before noon, but they do. And I'm sweeping, I'm vacuuming the swimming pools. I'm out in the sunlight of the Spirit. I'm up every morning. I'm starting to do all the stuff I used to do before I became a drunk. I'm surfing every morning. Then I'm doing the swimming pools. I got all day to hang out with you folks. I go to the meetings at night. I'm dating my mom, and then on the weekends I'm driving to Baltimore and helping my little sister put down, snap together hardwood floor. She wanted a new floor. I don't want anybody thinking I'm a carpenter and ask me to do something. But we're painting the walls in her house and fixing this place up and talking and becoming friends. And it turns out that that's what big brothers do. And some time went by, and I got a phone call after about a year or two of that, and it was this guy, Justin, that I knew she was dating. And he said, hey, I know your father's not a big part of your life anymore, but you're a huge part of your sister's life, and I'd love to ask you for her hand in marriage. And I don't know how that happens. I've never felt less qualified for anything in my life. Asking, a deadbeat, no good, big brother like me for little sister's hand in marriage. And that was followed by a phone call from her a couple days later asking if I'd walk her down the aisle. And you guys taught me to, show up, look alert, be on time, dress for the occasion. All the stuff I learned in AA, that I got to bring into my family and the other areas of my life. I'm paying the IRS back a little bit at a time. Like I said, I'm making a little bit, but a little's a lot in AA. It took me the better part of 4.5 years. I remember Roger and I, one of the things that happened, I was about 3 years sober, and some of the old-timers do a ski trip, and they invited me on the ski trip to go out to Colorado. And I said, oh, they invited me. I get to go with the old-timers. And Roger said, how are you going to do that? He said, you're supposed to be paying the IRS $300 every month. And I said, well, I didn't pay him for like 12 years. If I miss one payment, I've been... And he said, oh, so you're going skiing with their money. He said, how free do you want to be? He said, one day you'll be standing at the top of that mountain, skiing, a free man. You won't owe anybody anything. And I didn't know what he was talking about, and I was mad, and I pouted, but I stayed home, and I sent the money to the IRS. And after 4.5 years, we went to the mailbox together. We were at the post office. We put the last check in the mail to the IRS. We high-fived, and it was an awesome day. It was about a year later when an envelope came. I opened it up, and there was a check in it from the IRS. And I called him. I said, I got a check from the IRS. He said, yeah, that's called a tax return, dummy. You know, regular people get those all the time. That stuff's a big deal for a guy like me. You know. Next on the list was my best friend since about this big, a guy named Ethan. And Ethan and I grew up, and his parents were like a second set of parents to me. In the ninth step, I've always ended my ninth step. I guess I should say this about my mom before I move on, because I learned a lot about my perception. At the end of it, it's always, I go through what I think I did and why I'm here and why I'm doing this, is that we have this thing called the ninth step, where I have to do my best to clear up the wreckage of my past, and I'm not sure how to do that, but I'm willing to do whatever you tell me to do to make this right. How can I make this right? And then listen and do what they say. Also with my mother, I asked the question, is there anything that I've missed? What my mother said blew my mind. She said, I just want to ask you something. With all of your friends, you never brought them back to the house in high school on the weekends. I never met any of your girlfriends. When you came home in college, you'd stay at your friends' houses. Are you embarrassed of me because I'm a little overweight? That's what she'd been living with for about 15 years. I said, I'm not embarrassed of you. You guys were nice parents and great parents. You didn't let us drink here. I had other friends whose parents let us drink. That's why I was always at their house. It had nothing to do with you and everything to do with drinking. And I saw a weight come off my mother's shoulders, and how I could make it right. There's people in this room that have met my mother. She comes to my anniversaries, when we go bowling. She likes to come bowling with us. She knows my friends in AA. All my sponsees call her Mom. She gets to do the dating process with me. When I'll say, Mom, I met a new girl, her name's this, I introduce my mom. Every now and then I listen to her input. She's a nice girl. And unbelievable. So Ethan, he asked me to be the best man in his wedding. I was living in California. I'm a big shot. I'm drinking and doing what I do. And I was just too drunk and whatever to get on the plane. His father had sent me a tuxedo, paid for everything. I didn't show up, and if you're like me, when you don't show up, you don't call, because I'm a coward, and that's what I do. And then you go on the secret no-call list, which is where I can't take your phone call, and I need the caller ID, and now you're one more person that when you call, I can't answer the phone. And that gets worse and worse and worse in my gut over a period of time. And it had been 9 years since the wedding. And I called Ethan. He lived, again, about 3 hours away. And I said, can I come have a few minutes of your time? I know you hate me. And I'd heard that Ethan, this wife, was wonderful. I'd heard that they had 2 kids that were wonderful. And, you're hearing about their lives like third party, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And I told him I needed to come speak with him, and I was sober, and I wanted to stay that way, and I probably couldn't stay sober unless he'd give me 5 minutes of his time to try to straighten this out. And he said, yes, you could come Saturday morning at 7 a.m. if you can make it. So he remembered. Yeah. I guess he had a little resentment. And I showed up. I left at 3:30 in the morning, traveled through the night, got there in the morning, was about 5 minutes early, like you guys taught me. And I noticed his parents' car was there, and they were there waiting to see if the drunk would show up. And I knew that it was going to be ugly. And I knocked on the door. And when I knocked on the door, Ethan opened the door, and I saw his wife standing by the kitchen counter. And I saw a little girl in the back playing. And what I didn't see was a little boy that darted up, and he grabbed a hold of my leg like a tree trunk. And he looked up in my eyes, and he said, you're my Uncle Rich. Daddy said one day I'd meet you. And our book says that 9 out of 10 times the unexpected happens when we make amends in this fashion. 9 out of 10 times. And you guys have never lied to me. Jim never lied to me. Roger's never lied to me yet. And I went in the other room after talking with Ethan. I sat down with his father and did the same thing with his father. And I had a pocket full of money. And I said, I know I owe you some money. And he said, you're right, you do. You owe me $1,372. That's a lot of money for a swimming pool sweeper-outer. But I had it, and took it out and was going to pay. He said, no, you don't owe me. He said, if you really have a home group and you're really a part of this Alcoholics Anonymous thing that you're here talking about, the way that you're going to pay me back is no more than $10 at a time. You're going to take donuts to your home group. You're going to buy coffee when they need it. You're going to put the $10 of gas in a new guy's car that's having trouble getting to and from the meetings. You're going to save every single receipt. None of them can be more than $10. And when it's $1,372, you bring them to me, and on that day your amends will be complete. Cool. By the way, I've been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for 28 years, and I've been praying for you and Ethan since you've been that big. That's what he told me. And I had no idea. But it's good to have a sponsor because sponsors see things different. They're an objective third party to my life. I can't see my life very clearly. I'm involved in it. I'm not a very good grade of my own paper, you know. I always give me an A or a B. And I don't think Roger's ever given me an A or a B. And the day that I get an A or a B from my sponsor, I'm getting another sponsor. Because it turns out that he thinks that a sponsor's only job is an adequate presentation of the steps. That's it. And he said, well, it's time for your big one now, and that's to go turn yourself in on the last of your warrants out in California. I had failed to show up for a court date, and it turned into where the judge told me that if this happened and I didn't come back, he's going to give me every day of the 5 years. And it was just 5 years, but that's a lot when you're sober in AA a couple years and life's getting good and you got the swimming pool business and your mom likes you again and, you're friends with your little sister and people are back in your life. And, those little kids, Ethan's kids, I'll tell you this, part of the rest of that amends, what that looks like for me. I have not missed a Christmas for the last 5 years. I'm there. I go to my family and then I go to his family with those kids. I haven't missed a birthday. When it snows, I show up and take those kids sleigh riding and do fun stuff. You know how little kids are. They don't know the difference. They look at me and they say, Uncle Rich, you show up on all the good days. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous taught me, to show up on the good days. And they're all good days when we show up. That's the flip side of it. So anyways, I didn't want to do this. He gave me the how free do you want to be? Ground beef or filet mignon. And next thing you know, I'm on an airplane to San Diego. My home group went to the airport and hugged me and sent me off. They told me that if I did the 5 years that they'd come visit me. And I felt like, I was sponsoring guys, and they all said, we'll come visit. I said, you got to do it. It's what you tell us to do. It's important to have sponsees. They make you do stuff you might not do, because the way AA works for me, it's like a train, right? If there's a train wreck, it's usually because the caboose falls off. But once you're the caboose and you get a couple new guys and a couple of cars hook up in back of the caboose and you're in the middle of the train, you very rarely see a car in the middle of a train derail, So I've got my sponsor in front and a couple of the guys in back, and I'm along for the ride right in the middle of AA, and that's where I do best. I don't want to be out in front, and I sure don't want to be the caboose anymore. I've dropped off the train enough times. So out I go in front of the judge, and what I didn't know is that about 40-some of you folks had written letters to the judge prior to me getting them there, telling that judge what my life looked like, what I was doing in AA, who I was helping, how I was helping, and asking if I could come back to be a part of the community. And the judge had read those, and I walked out of there. He said, Mr. Bruckner, whatever you're doing back in Maryland, keep it up. And I can tell you that my God got bigger that day. I went in front of I had huge sweat circles. I'd been to the bathroom 3 times. This whole faith and fear thing don't exist at the same time. I think faith is walking through fear. I was scared to death. I'd like to tell you that I had like some dignity about it or something. I was scared to death. And I came out of that courtroom and I called Roger and I said, I'm not in jail. I'm coming home. I'm coming home. And I'll tell you, to this day, I have my one-way ticket home from San Diego in the front of my big book because it was one of the greatest days. And I'm expecting my sponsor to say, man, that's incredible, that's great. But he's Roger, so he doesn't say that. he says, well, you can't come home until tomorrow. Why don't you go over to that Jesuit school that kicked you out and see if you can straighten things out while you're there? I mean, the guy's like relentless, but going over to the school, compared to going to jail for 5 years, didn't seem like big doings. Yeah. So I go over there and I ask to speak to the dean of the university. It's a woman named Carrie. I've talked to her. She knows I do this now, and she doesn't mind if I tell you guys that Dean Carrie. And I made my amends with her. She said, we've known that about you. She said, I've had you in my office 3 times, and I told you that the teachers were telling me that, you smelled like alcohol, your nose was always running, you were going back and forth to the bathroom. You sat here, actually, in the same chair you're in, and you told me that you're from the East Coast. You had allergies. That's why your nose is always running. And we just wanted to help you. And I said, I know that now. I didn't know that then. And you don't know what you don't know. And there's only 2 kinds of people in AA, I think, and it's those that know and those that don't know, and nobody's any better if you've been through the steps and gotten a little glimpse of this wonderful thing that we have here. All you have is more responsibility to help the next guy to see. There's no reward greater than that. That is the reward. And she said, if you're really serious about making this right, and straightening out what you did with this school, I'd like you to come with me and I'd like you to fill out this paperwork. This is for our law school. I'd like you to go here and graduate. I'd like you to become a lawyer and make us proud. That's how you can make us right. We like to graduate people, believe it or not. That's what makes us look good, not kicking people out. And I called Roger and I said, listen to this. She wants me to go to law school and fill out this paperwork and stuff. I've been arrested 36 times. They're not going to... Even if I get into the school, they're not going to let me take the bar exam and blah, blah. I mean, I had things figured out 10 years down. He said, did you tell the lady you do whatever she said to make it right? I said, yes, I did. He said, shut up, get off the phone, and fill out the paperwork. And I did, and I'll tell you what, I did fantastic in law school. I did law school the AA way. I was a half an hour early for every class. I had my hand out to the teacher. Every teacher knew my name, just like you all knew my name. I stayed a half an hour after and asked questions whether I had any or not, just like when we talked to newcomers, And I just did it the AA way. And I felt like an old guy amongst young people. My head told me, they're younger, faster, blah, 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 all that stuff. And I just kept showing up. I got the greatest job that you could probably get at a law school. I was hired by 2 circuit court judges to be a judicial clerk. The other part of my 9th step experience to share with you guys is the 9th step is our opportunity to clean up the wreckage of our past, or it will come back and clean me up. One of the 2. It's coming. It's just a matter of how I wish to address it. And these judges hired me. They knew my past. I disclosed everything to them. They asked the question. It was pretty funny. They said, on paper you look great, your resumes, you have these wonderful references, and your grades are great, but what's with these 36 arrests? And I said, well, guys, I disclosed to you, that I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. What you might not be familiar with is that there's a substantial period of drinking required for membership. And they had the same result you did. They just started laughing. So I fill out the paperwork. I tell my mother, my home group, oh man, let's look at this great thing that's happening. God is shining upon me. We send off the paperwork to Annapolis. The judges call me back in the week after I was hired to fire me. I never started. The job was supposed to start in 6 months. They said the paperwork came back from Annapolis. It turns out that you have 3 felony warrants out of the state of Colorado. You're a fugitive. We can't hire a fugitive. They weren't anywhere on my invite. I didn't remember. Wasn't anywhere on my lists. I said, guys, I've told you the truth about everything. This isn't supposed to start for a while. Will you give me a chance to make this right with Colorado? Can I still have the job? They said, what the hell? We just hired somebody with 36 arrests. What's 37? So I go to Colorado. I get this thing squared away in Colorado. It turns out that when you don't pay me enough that I think you should be paying me, I have a tendency to write myself bonus checks out of your checkbook. They call that felony check fraud. I thought it was getting what I deserve. But I got that squared away. Came back. They said I could still have the job, but in the meantime, my phone rang. On the other end of the phone was some guy who said he was the state's attorney for the state of Maryland, and that they just got a large federal grant, and he was looking to hire an assistant state's attorney to head up a narcotics and gang prosecution unit, and he understands that I have some experience with narcotics. And I'm on the phone thinking, you got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. And really the next thing that goes through my head, when you folks talk to me and life happens to me, I see the big book come alive. It's just how my mind works from you guys. And paragraphs come alive from this book. And I'm saying, this is the part where your sordid past becomes your greatest asset. You know, like it's happening. You know, they didn't lie to me. They didn't lie to me. You know, and I went back to the judges and I said, hey guys, look at what do you think I should do? They said, you'd be a fool if you don't take that job. That's what I've done for the last 3 years of my life. I'm the assistant state's attorney for the state of Maryland. It turns out that I'm a pretty good prosecutor. They have a hard time lying to me. It was tough, you know, the first couple of weeks. They would say things like, you know, would the defendant please rise? And I'd stand up and the judges would give me the, sit down. And I'd sit down and I'd be embarrassed. But I got the hang of it. And I'll tell you that I get to bring this into every area of my life. These 12 steps. I get a lot of these people are just like us, you know, and they're just like me. I see myself standing at the other table, and sometimes I get to talk to them if they want to talk about alternatives to jail, shall we say? And some of them do, and some of them don't, and that's on them. You know, we're in the delivery business. This wonderful message of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't be attached to the results. I had one story I want to tell real quick. As you could tell, I love AA. I have a hard time shutting up about it. And I had this one guy, to me this story just shows how little we know and how little we have to do with it other than delivering this message in our 12th step. And Drew was a retired merchant marine, and he wanted to retire off to, he had a sailboat like a Jimmy Buffett wannabe, and was going to go down off of Panama to some area called Boca del Toro and retire on a sailboat. And he had like 4 months sober, but we'd been through the steps in the book. And he went down there and he said, the only problem is I've tried getting some AA going. They don't read English. We ordered a case of Spanish big books from New York. I helped Drew load this sailboat and his case of Spanish big books, and off he went. And I didn't hear from Drew for like 3 years, and I assumed he got drunk, which Drew always did, because he always had one of these cockamamie ideas. And one day I was having a bad day in court and everything else, and my phone rang, and it was some weird phone number. And on the other end of the phone was some guy that said, Me llamo Juan, yo soy alcohólico, which is, my name's Juan, I'm an alcoholic. I speak Spanish from working with the Mexicans. And the next, they hand the phone to another guy. He says, Me llamo Ricardo, yo soy alcohólico. Me llamo Pedro, yo soy alcohólico. This goes on for like 3 minutes. I talked to 12 guys. Finally, they hand the phone. Hey, Rich, this is Drew. You just talked to the Boca del Toro group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he got the darn thing going. So it says great events will come to pass, for me and countless others. I've seen it time and time again. Every day I get to say two great things in my life. Every morning I stand before those judges and I say, "Good morning, Your Honor, Rich Bruckner for the state of Maryland." And every night I get to stay amongst you folks and say, "My name is Rich Bruckner. I'm an alcoholic." Thanks for having me.